right, sorry for the issues, everybody. We'll let everybody refresh their browser here. Give people a minute to refresh their browser here, so we'll get started. Sorry for the delay. I've been having internet trouble all day, or all weekend, actually. Just hasn't been very stable all weekend. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So Greg T says, "Hey Q, my left wrist is cupped at the top of the backswing. Should I rotate my left wrist during the backswing to flatten the left wrist? Do you have a good drill?" So it depends on a few factors. So one would be the strength of your grip. If you have a really strong grip, you can get away with a wrist that's kind of cupped at the top, right? So what I mean by strong grip is that your wrists are more rotated on the side of the grip, right? So your hands are more like this on the grip, right? So when you're like that, you can afford to be in a little bit of a cupped kind of position here at the top, because the face is going to be in a little bit stronger position because of the strengthened grip, right? So if I were to have a really strong grip and then also bow my wrist, my club face would be really, really closed. And I would have to be able to get a lot of shaft lean to be able to accommodate how closed that club face is. Because getting shaft lean, releasing the club out in front, opens the face a little bit. So if I were to really shut everything a mile to have a little bit of an early release. So yeah, it really depends on your grip. Now, if you have a very weak grip, right? If you have a very weak grip, your thumbs are more kind of on top of the grip here. Then yeah, generally having a flat to strong, kind of a bowed lead wrist at the top, that'll help get the face in a little bit better position coming down to help you get the club face closed and help you to maybe even get some shaft lean at contact. So really depending on your grip, then yes, I would say some amount may be good to have. So a good drill for that would really be just the move. That's basically what the move is. The tennis racket drill in the move course would be a good drill for that. So if you want to check that out, you can click the instruction tab, then click the Toss Golf system, then click the move, and work through those drills if you're in that situation. But if you have a really strong grip and the club face is already closed and you're bowing it more, it's really, really tough to get a ton of shaft lean to be able to accommodate that. So just take a look at that. So Rodo says full swing versus on plane swing. If the on plane swing is simpler and more precise, should I go for an on plane swing with pitching wedge instead of full swing with gap wedge? In any case, what are the most important tips for a strong and consistent on plane swing? So yeah, you certainly could do that, but if you choose a pitching wedge instead of the gap wedge, it's going to go lower and have less spin, right? So if you want to have if you need to have some bite and you need to have some height on your shot, you may want to have a longer swing. But if you don't need that bite, right? So a situation might be the pin is all the way in the back of the green and you can land it in the middle of the green and let it kind of release out. Well, if that's the case, you can kind of hit a 3/4 pitching wedge kind of shot because it's going to come in a little bit lower. It's going to have a little bit less spin and it can roll out. But if the pin's on the front of the green, right, you can't really, hit that kind of shot very close, right? So you may want to opt for the higher trajectory because the gap wedge is going to have a little bit more loft and it's going to have a little bit more spin, so it's going to stick more too. So it kind of depends on the shot. Now, as far as the most important tips for a strong, consistent on plane swing, I guess, it's just not any different. You're just not going past 3/4. Really, that's all it is. It's just you're not going past here. Once you go kind of past here, you kind of have to go above, right? But you're just kind of turning everything together is pretty much for the most part. So if you're having issues with that swing, I'll be happy. Let me know what those issues are with your ball flight and contact. I'll be happy to give you some tips, but without knowing that it's hard for me to know what exactly you're looking for. So Janice K says, can you review R? I'm guessing she got cut off. I'm not really sure what you're asking there. So Steve DQ, I have a problem with hitting the ground first and then the ball. I do drills and practice swings with no ball and can take divots that would be in front of the ball if I was actually hitting the ball. But as soon as I put the ball on the ground, I start hitting the ground 6 inches behind my practice swing. I don't know if this is a mental issue or a visual issue or what. Do you have any suggestions to fix? Thanks. Yeah, so I would compare the two swings. Compare your swing. Get the video camera out and compare your no ball swing with your ball swing, right? So that way you can see exactly what's breaking down, and then you can focus on that piece, right? So typically, what controls the ground contact? There's three main factors there. So one is going to be your compression line, which is the fourth piece of the top speed golf system. This is the line that goes from my lead ankle, lead hip, and lead shoulder. If I'm very angled away from the target at impact, I'm going to tend to hit very much behind the golf ball. If I'm more forward, I'm going to tend to hit more in front of the golf ball, right? So generally, we like to see that for shots that are off the turf, we like to see that compression line be vertical or just slightly angled away, like a degree or two, something like that. For the driver, we can be more angled away because we're trying to hit up on the ball. But for an iron, because we want to make ball first contact, we want to be more vertical. If we get too far forward, we might get to where we're chopping down on the ball too much. So vertical to just slightly angled away is good. So if you look at your video and you see when the ball isn't there, you have a good compression line, and then when it is there, you're hanging back. Well, then that could be your answer, right? So that could be part of it. Another thing is our path of the club. So if we swing very much from the inside, right? So if we swing too much into out, right? We want to swing from the inside, but if you do too much of anything, it can be bad, right? So if you get too much from the inside, then you can tend to hit the ground before the golf ball. So if you imagine if I swung 45 degrees from the inside, right? Well, I would contact the ground back here more toward my lead foot, or excuse me, my trail foot. Now, if I'm on the other side of it, if I swung 45 degrees over the top, so I swung way out to in, right? Well, then I'd be contacting the ground much more up here, all things equal. So if you're swinging, you could be looking at it on video, and then when the ball is there, maybe you swing way too much from the inside. I'd say that's a little less common, but that could be what's going on there, right? And then lastly would be the release of the club. This probably has some to do with it as well. A lot of people, can get the club to release properly without the ball there, and then when the ball's there, they release the club early. I'll go into why that is. So the release has a lot to do with where you contact the ground. So if you imagine if I come down here and I just stop and I release the club, where does the club hit the ground? Way behind the ball. Now, if I go here again and then I release a lot later, well, then my club hits the ground much more forward. So an early release can make you hit the ground sooner as well. Now, the reason why a lot of times people can get that club to release out in front when the ball is not there versus when it is. When the ball is there, then they start flipping and early releasing again, is because of the face orientation. You see, when you early release the club, that is a way of getting the club face to close, right? So if I come in and I really early release the club, that gets the club face closed. So if I'm coming in and I have the face very open, or this is just my mechanism for squaring up the face, then then that's a difficult thing to change. And a lot of times, those people that struggle with, they can do the release without the golf ball there. When they look at their video more closely, they'll see that the club face is wide open, right? It's because when the golf ball is there, there's no consequence for having the face open. So your brain doesn't make the connection. Okay, I need to close the club face. But when the ball is there, your brain knows, okay, we don't want to hit a ball 45 degrees to the right. So it early releases the club to square it back up. So those would be the things that I'd be looking at in your swing. So I'd kind of compare the two and see what's going on there, and then work on the appropriate action. So Janice K says, "Can you review the weight transfer in the swing?" So yeah. So let's talk about. Whoops. Someone's at my door. Sorry. All right. Sorry about that. It is live, so sometimes people knock on my door. So anyway, uh, so let's keep going here. So, oh yeah, weight transfer. Okay, so let's talk about two things that I think really confuse people with weight transfer. So, weight transfer is really what you're talking about is that your center of mass, right? Your mass should transfer that much. Typically, when you some weight to their trail side, about an inch, they'll shift about an inch, right? And from there, they'll move forward about 4 or 5 inches, right? So they'll shift an inch, then they'll shift back, and then they'll move forward about 4 or 5 inches. What people are really talking about typically when they're saying weight transfer is pressure shift. So that's what you're feeling in your feet. So in the start of the swing, you typically are pretty equal. Some players you'll see will have a little bit more on the lead side just so they can transfer some into their trail side. So if I shift swing, so I shift the pressure into the trail side, and then my pressure in my trail foot is peaking this area of my backswing. So about halfway back in my backswing is where that pressure is peaking. And then it's going to start to gradually start to shift pressure to my trail side, or excuse me, to my lead side. So I'm in my trail side right away, and that's peaking in this area. So I'm going to be about 75-80% pressure in my trail leg about right here. And then as I get up to the top, I'm going to gradually be moving it toward the lead side. And at the top of the swing, I'm basically going to be about 50-50 pressure, but it's moving to my lead side. So it's in my trail side. I'm adding up. I'm peaking the lead side. Now I'm about 50-50. Now it's continuing to increase. And that's going to peak out about lead arm parallel in the downswing. When we look at most players, most better players, they're going to see that. And then it gradually moves down as we come into impact. And that's really just because of the physics of how the club is coming down. You're still pushing into the ground. It's just that because this is where the most of the force is. That's where you're going to have here. It's just you can't help but to push any more than what you're doing all the way into impact. And then as you come all the way around the full finish, you're going to have pretty much all your weight on your lead foot. So I get pressure early here. I'm recentering. I'm getting pressure to my lead foot, and then I'm peaking right here, and then I'm continuing to push into the ground as I come all the way around into the full finish. When I see players struggle, typically what's going on is one, they're not shifting pressure into their trail leg. They're doing it too late, right? So they'll start their backswing, and then they don't really get pressure in their trail foot until about halfway up, and by that time it's too late, right? So what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we apply pressure very, very quickly. Have just four players, they'll move about an inch. They'll have a weight transfer of about 1 inch to start the swing. And then right away in that takeaway, when that club gets parallel to the ground, they're basically recentered, right? So if you draw a line on the outside of the hip, you'll see they'll move into that line just a little bit. Just as the club starts to go back, they'll move into that line. And then as they get right here, club parallel to the ground, often referred to as P2, position 2, they will be already moved back on that other side of that line and then be continuing as they get up to the top. So that's one mistake that I see is that players tend to not put pressure into that trail leg early enough. And then sometimes as a kind of a compound effect of that, they'll get pressure on that trail leg too late, right? And it will stay there, right? So at the top of the swing, they're pretty much entirely on that trail foot with the pressure, right? And then from there, we can't really get on the lead side soon enough. So it all kind of compounds. So pressure early, trail side, peaking here. We want to be recentering, pressure early into the lead foot in the downswing, and then continuing to push all the way through. So that's kind of what the weight transfer is all about. Now, a good way to get a good feeling for that would be step drills. So what I would do is start with the feet together and have the club in front, take a step, step about a foot and swing the club back. And then as the club's swinging back, step forward and then be pushing into the ground to start the downswing and then swing the club forward. That's basically what we want to feel pressures in the feet. So Jason Y says, in the downswing, does the chin stretch toward the chest? Example, Tommy Fleetwood. In the example, Tommy Fleetwood, which looks like may help to allow to stay in posture, but was curious from your perspective. I notice similar head movements in most pros. It's not really something I thought about. I think he's just trying to keep his head kind of down through the shot, trying to keep his eye line there. So if you're really shifting your eye line everywhere, it can throw off your perspective. So he's probably just trying to keep his eye line where it needs to be. So he's pushing his chest, his head down a little bit. As far as posture is concerned, it probably doesn't, you want to be looking through. If you're looking at the bottom of your eyes, so if you're at the top of the swing, you're looking at the bottom of your eyes, your coordination isn't going to be as good. Whereas if you kind of look straight out through your eyes, right, then your coordination is much better, your hand-eye coordination. So that's really what that's probably more about. Rodo says, hi there, the video froze and I missed your answer to my question above about the full swing versus swing. Is there a way to get the video? So basically, I'll just answer it kind of again. So we do have the archived office hours, but if it froze here, it's probably going to be frozen on there too. So, but to get the archived office hours when we're done, I'll go over it again. But when we're done, you can go to the office hours highlights at the top, and then go to the bottom of the page there, and you can see all the office hours that we've done. I don't know how many it keeps in there. I think it kind of knocks out the oldest one, but I think at least like the last 100 or so are in there. So you can knock yourself out with all those. If you want pointers about the on-plane swing versus the full swing, it's not really any different. So you're just going to 3/4 and you're not lifting your arms up. So I don't know what you're looking for pointer wise on that. So if you have something specific, I can help. But as far as, using your pitching wedge in a 3/4 swing versus a gap wedge in a full swing, that can totally be a fine way to go. But what we want to understand is that a pitching wedge is going to go lower and it's going to have less spin, right? So if you need the ball to stick, that may not be the best play, right? So if you have a pin that's in the back of the green, then that might be a good play because you can land it in the middle of the green and it can release to the back and it's not a big deal. But if you have a pin in the front, right, in order to get that pitching wedge to stay, depending on how soft the course is, you may have to, if you were to hit a pitching wedge in that situation, to hit it anywhere near the hole, you may have to land it short of the green, and that's not ideal. I would rather hit a gap wedge with more. Apologize for the connection, everybody. It's probably going to freeze in and out, telling me that the connection's unstable. Internet's been bad all weekend. I think they're having issues around here. So I'm sorry for that, but we did have a kind of a cold front move through Florida. I doubt it has anything to do with that, but who knows? So yeah, Greg T says, hi Q, me again with a follow-up question. Does the club face rotate during the backswing? Yeah, it rotates. You can't really keep the face square throughout the swing. It's got to close some, or it's got to open and close some in order to have the right mechanics. So yeah, it's going to open and close some. Now we don't want to roll the face way open. That's gonna make it more difficult to get the club face closed. Generally, a good spot when you bring the club back is to have the club face to kind of match your back angle, right? And then when you get up to the top of the swing, you like to see the club face kind of pointing up toward the sky. I think that's generally a good place to be. And then when you come down again, match the back angle. Now, it really depends. If you're someone who has a lot of shaftling, you may want to have it more closed. If you're someone who has kind of more of an early release, you might want to have it a little bit more open. But yeah, it does open and close on the backswing and the downswing. Terry R says, why do I have a lighter grip pressure when hitting driver and a tendency for too much grip pressure when hitting irons? That's a good question. I really don't know. Might be because you're bracing to hit the ground with the irons, because you're trying to hit down and through the ball. Whereas with the driver, you don't hit the ground, so your wrists are a little bit more loose. That would be my guess, but to be honest, I really don't know. Bill S says, "Hi Q. If I already draw the provide more power in the swing, so more control of the club, right? So I can come down steep and still hit a draw, right? Because all you need to do to hit a draw is have the face close to the path, right? So what that means is when the face is close to the direction that I'm hitting the ball, right? So I can come down steep and I can angle my body like this, come down steep, and then just close the face, and I can still hit a draw. Now, I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but you may not necessarily, that's not necessarily going to be, and you can shallow the club and hit a fade too. It's just a matter of, is the face open to the pass? So the reason why we want to shallow out the club is that it gets the mass of the club head behind the hands. When the mass is in front, it's a lot harder to control, right? The face doesn't want to square up on its own. And it gets a lot harder to control your face and your path in your strike and your ground contact. So it's just harder to make good contact when you're not shallowing out the club. So ideally, we would get this hit draws or fades, and that way it's already in a position and I don't have to make any crazy compensations. I can just I can just almost take this club with one arm and just swing through, and I know the face is going to be square. If you watch, there's videos of John Daly like hitting like full swing wedge shots, like one arm, right? And the reason why he has control of that is because he's shallowing the club. He's getting that club kind of behind his hands, and he's just kind of whipping it through there. If he came down and he had this club like this coming down, it would be extremely difficult to be able to do that. So getting that feeling of getting that club shallowing out, and then you can kind of turn through makes it a lot easier. Now there are some players that come down a little bit steep in the beginning of the swing, and then they shallow it a little bit later. Phil Mickelson would be one of those. When he's coming down, he's kind of like this, and then he gets it to kind of work underneath and shallow. But when you do that, that club face is going to tend to want to open, right? Because my hands kind of work out that way to get it to shallow. And when I do that, that face wants to open, right? And now I have to do something else to close it, and everything gets really dependent on timing. So that's why Phil, when it comes down to pressure, Phil's probably one of the best athletes, if not the best athlete to play on the PGA Tour, and his hand-eye coordination is second to none, I think, because he's won X amount of majors. I don't know how many it is. He's got a steep initially swing, a lot of really good timing. So if you're like Phil and you have, impeccable timing, that's why he's such a great short game player, you can get away with it. But there's been some times in his career where he hasn't gotten away with it, right? That driver's gotten really, really wild on him because when there's so much speed, the timing has to be right on. Where Johnson, John Rahm, all these players, they're long and they're very, very accurate with their driver. They shallow out the club, and it just makes it a lot easier. So I would recommend shallowing it as early as you can in the downswing, so that way you can have more control of it. Just makes things a lot easier. And a lot of times it does provide more power because you don't have to make any compensations in the swing to get the club on plane. In those compensations sometimes can slow you down, right? So it doesn't always necessarily add power, but it certainly can. All right, so let's get going here. So Steve D says, Q, I'm working on pressure weight shifts, but do not have the luxury of access to pressure plates. Aside from the step drill, do you have any recommendations for a home training aid? You don't really need anything other than step drills. So I would go from Dr. Kwan, if you are familiar with him. He actually just started kind of a YouTube channel where he's posting a lot of stuff. But Dr. Kwan, he's a golf biomechanist, and it's KWON if you want to look it up on YouTube. You can watch him how he goes through with he has players come in and has them do step drills and things like that. I would just do that. If you want to work on weight shift, keep it simple. Just do that. There's no need for gadgets or anything like that, to be honest. I mean, if something works, why do something complicated, more complicated? I mean, just do that. It's really quite that simple just to do step drills. So if there was something better, I would tell you, but there really isn't. Right-handed, should my left leg be almost totally straight at impact? When does the left leg straighten on the downswing? So generally, it's not going to be totally straight. If it's totally straight at impact, then it's going to be hard to continue to rotate, right? So if I'm coming in here and I've got my leg straight, well, I'm running out of anything to help rotate my hips other than the momentum of the club, right? And that's not generally what you want. Now, there are some players, like a Brooks Koepka has his lead leg pretty straight at impact, but he doesn't rotate his hips a lot. And he has a very, very strong upper body, which allows him to kind of manipulate that a little bit. So yeah, generally I would say that lead leg is not going to be straight at impact. We want it to be straightening, but not straight. And generally, when we look at most players, that lead leg is going to start to straighten about halfway down in the downswing. So I'm here. I believe it's level 2 or level 3 of the power turn course where Clay's talking about, how the legs are kind of releasing the club and so on and so forth. So yeah, if that lead leg is straight, then at impact, then it's going to be hard to get that club released out in front because your rotation is going to stall and that club's going to flip. All right, keep the questions coming. Just checking the coming. We got 30 minutes, not quite 30 minutes left here. Question to be asked. So if you got them, keep them coming. For questions. All right. I think I'm going to give a couple more, maybe like a minute or two to ask a question. If there's no questions, then I'm just going to jump off here. So JT says, if I change from an 11.5 degree driver to a 10.5 degree driver, what would that gain me in distance? Most likely nothing. It's probably not going to make much of a difference at all. I mean, you can try, but it's not going to make much of a difference. It's going to be a little less spin, but you're going to hit a little less. You're going to hit it a little lower. So, it's not necessarily going to get you more distance. So Tom M says, "Hey Q, I am having trouble swaying to the left of the ball on swing. Any thoughts on how to fix? I'm right-handed. Yeah, work through the compression line course. That's the fourth piece of the top speed golf system. If you're getting out too far ahead of the ball, that's the compression line course. So in the compression line, a good drill to do is to just take an alignment stick. This is a drill actually from the compression line course. Around vertically, kind of right outside your hip here. We definitely want to have some lateral movement. So you don't want to put it, if you're set up like this, you don't want to put it at an angle. But if you put it straight up and down vertical in the ground outside your hip, and then practice just making swings where you kind of turn your hip away from that and you don't touch it as you're coming through, then that's a that's a good drill to do to help you come from swaying. So the idea here is we want to push into the ground, push the hip out of the way. We don't want to push in. You don't want to transfer to your lead side and then just keep sliding. So as soon as you get to that lead side, push into the ground, down and out away from you. So if you're standing on top of a clock, imagine, the ball is like where 12 o'clock is. I push down and out away from you toward 10:30 to push your hip back away from that stick, right? If you don't forward, right? So get down and push your hip back and around. So that way you're not sliding the hips and you're getting everything to open up nicely. All right, keep the questions coming. Swing, I noticed that my right hand and elbow do backswing. Right-handed, is that a problem, and could this be preventing me from increasing my swing speed? Certainly could. So I'd have to see your swing to know what's going on, but I would make sure that you're getting a full turn, right? So we want to make sure that we are turning our hips, right, and turning our shoulders. Your average from their rib cage here, so our shoulder blades, our scapulas can move toward and away from our spine. So that's protraction and retraction. I can protract my lead shoulder and retract my trail shoulder. And generally, a tour player you're going to see is turning, roughly about 120 degrees total from their shoulder sockets, right, to the ground. So if I don't turn, right, then my arms aren't going to get very high. If I turn, then my arms can get a lot higher. So that'd be the first thing I would look at is are you getting a good shoulder turn, right? And that's really what the power turn course is, getting a good hip turn, getting a good shoulder turn, getting that good protraction, retraction of the shoulders. So that's a power turn course. So to get to the power turn course, click the instruction tab at the top of the screen, then the top speed golf system, then the power turn. Beyond that, it's more like raising up your arms, right? So I'd almost feel like, and there could be a lot of times when I see people who have really flat swings, sometimes, it's one of the most common things where I do see if you have a physical limitation that's keeping you from raising your arms, like you're doing a touchdown signal, right? So a good way to kind of test that would be to take against a wall. So basically put your back up against a wall and have your back completely flat to the wall. So everything's touching. Your back isn't arching. All of your lower spine is touching the wall. And then put your arms out in front of you and put your thumbs up. Keep your arms dead straight and keep your back flat on the wall and try to touch the wall behind you with your arms. If you can only get to like right here without arching your back, a good way to kind of make sure that you're not arching your back is to put a club kind of behind you. And if the club starts to fall out when you put your arms up, then you're arching your back, right? So keep your back flat to that wall and put your arms up. And if you're, some people, they'll start going like this, and like their right arm won't go up, but their left arm will kind of go up. Some people can just go all the way up to the top and and they can just touch and they don't have to bend their arms or anything. You're looking at, working with, someone who's qualified with how the body works to get you, physical therapist might be able to help you. Somebody in that area might be able to help you loosen that up if that is the case. But beyond that, if that's no problem, then it's just a mental thing, right? It's just a matter of, okay, I need to lift up my arms. I need to feel like I'm doing a touchdown signal. So a way you can kind of do that, or the way that you can kind of get the feeling for that, would be to just get in your address position, right? Because a good way to kind of think about it is to think about you split up the swing into horizontal components and vertical components. So your horizontal components are going to be your hip rotation and your shoulder rotation, right? So if I had no vertical components in my golf swing, my swing would look like this, right? Because I'm only turning my hips and my shoulders, right? If I only had vertical components in my golf swing, then it would look like this, right? I'm not turning my shoulders together. Well, there's the top of my swing. I'm at the top of my swing there. So that could be a good way to kind of help you feel, okay, I'm going to raise my arms up. So keep that lead arm pretty straight and put your hands up over your right shoulder as much as you can, and then turn up to the top. And there's your top of the swing position. All right. So golf posture, stay in your golf posture, hands up over the right shoulder. and then turn and stay in your posture. And there's the top of your swing with your hands up higher, right? And then swing down from there and get used to swinging down from there. And you can kind of start blending this into a normal swing, right? You can start going like this and hitting the ball, right? And you can start kind of feeling the same things, right? Going, toning it down little by little by little, feeling that momentum of the club shallowing out as well when you do that. Keep them coming. Mike S says that was an excellent exercise. No problem, Mike. Glad it helped. Christy says, working on my divots, I noticed that my closing the face at impact was giving me a better divot. Why doesn't anyone talk about that? Hold on a second. Working on my divots, I noticed that my closing the face at impact was giving me a better divot. Why doesn't anyone talk about that? Or you're squaring the face. If you open the face, right, so if I take this wedge, for example, and I open the face, look at what that does. That exposes the bounce of the club. So it's not going to dig as much. If I close the face, right, that gets the leading edge going down, so that club's going to dig more. So you're going to take more of a divot when you do that. So I don't know if that's what you mean by that, but yeah, opening the face. That's why with wedges, a lot of times, when you're trying to hit a little pitch shot or something like that, that's why a lot of times you open the face. One, to add loft, but to also help the club kind of interact with the turf a little bit more when you have that bounce and you're able to kind of bounce the club off the turf. Whereas if you have that leading edge, especially in there, and it just wants to stick in there, you hit a half inch behind the golf ball, you're in trouble. If you use the bounce a little bit, you'll have a little bit more margin for error there, right? I don't know if that's what you mean, but yeah, closing the face gets the leading edge more down for sure. Sorry, excuse me. It's been quiet around here all day, and now there's a bunch of deliveries going on. So my dog's hearing the delivery trucks and barking and everything else. Sorry about that. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. If we got any more questions. So you're talking about, but at the top of the swing, right? our right hip's going to start to move forward a little bit as our left hip moves down and around, and then it's going to move toward the target, right? So it's not like it just stays there, right? And then the left hip kind of moves around. There is a lateral shift of movement in the downswing, and the right hips move toward the target, right? So top of the swing and then toward the target, right? Got time for maybe one more or two quick ones. Starting to close the club face on the downswing with driver, and that is very hard for a regular golfer to pronate at impact. What are your thoughts? Yeah, if it's something that you don't naturally do, it is a difficult thing to do. But if you get that face square earlier, it means you don't have to do it later, right? So basically, if you come down and you're getting that face more square as you're coming down through, get your hands in front. So not all changes of the golf swing are going to be easy, right? If it was easy, then everyone would be a tour player, right? So there are things that are hard to change, and they take time and persistence to change them. So there are different kinds of things in the swing. So here would be, and this is something that I run into with students often. Students want to make these big changes. They're very much they're committed, and then they realize, oh man, this is going to take forever. This is hard, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, then making a technical change to your swing just isn't for you. Then you need to work on just improving your skill. So if you're not interested in, depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to be 10 handicap and you want to be a scratch player, you're going to need to change your technique because there are probably things in your tech, not always, but usually you're going to need to change your technique. And it's going to take some time and some effort to do that. And you're going to need to raise your skill level with that. If you're just looking to drop your handicap a couple strokes or something like that, I wouldn't even bother with changing your technique. I would only have one piece, unless you have a piece of technique that's like really, really off. So for example, if you're swinging like way to the top, it's going to be really, really difficult to be any good if you do that. So that I would definitely be, but if you're somewhere in the realm of getting the club on plane and you can at least hit pretty good straight shots right now, and you just don't hit them often enough, and you just want to lower your handicap a few strokes, I wouldn't even bother with technique, to be honest. I would be looking at skill type training type stuff. So working on hitting draws and fades, controlling your ground contact, controlling where you're hitting it on the face, doing drills like that. That's what our ball striking masterclass is. So anyway, thanks everybody. We're after 6 now, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time.